Well, happy, what day is it? Friday, April 29th, everybody. It's hard to believe we are at the end of the spring semester, at least. For some of us, I know it doesn't totally feel like spring, depending on if you've gone snow recently or if it's still relatively chilly. But we are glad that you are here for our Canvas meeting. My name is Brett Nachman. I'm with the College Autism Network's leadership team, and we're glad to have you here. We know many of you have joined us for past meetings in the past, but if not, a quick primer. We have these every month in which we feature generally a researcher or researchers or folks doing some cool stuff with their college autism programs. And today is no exception. We'll be having our very own CAN leadership team technology extraordinaire, Dr. Brittany Jackson. So Brittany is going to be talking about her recent dissertation research shortly. But in case this is your first meeting, just a few just things to be mindful of. Please make sure your microphone is muted if you are not actively speaking. That way we cut out any background noise. But if you do want to participate verbally, please do unmute your microphone. We also have the chat function where you can insert questions and thoughts and ideas, and we welcome you to participate there. You are also welcome to use the chat as a space for inputting questions that you have for our presenter, because at the end of our 1 hour today, we'll have time for Q&A. So we encourage you to utilize that. If you are not in our meeting agenda already, I will drop in a link there because it'd be very helpful that you indicate that you are in attendance by highlighting your name or adding your name if you haven't already done so. And we'd love to start off with a little icebreaker. We usually just do this at the beginning of every meeting. So feel free to do this in the chat, or if you'd like to speak up, you're welcome to do that. So the theme of this month is, it's the end of the semester. So the question for everybody is, what are you most excited about with it being the end of the spring semester? For those of you who are in schools or organizations and colleges, or even if you're in other spaces, what are you happiest about now that it is getting closer to summer? So we welcome your contributions here. So we already have some thoughts. Courtney is excited about their first in-person graduation. Very cool. Dave says the hills are properly clothed once more. Beth, no tuition payments due until August. Very good. Jill Underhill, looking forward to having more time to focus on research this summer. Yes, you and me both, Jill. Brittany is excited about summer hours. Oh, lots of good thoughts coming in here. Similarly with Kimberly, dig in on projects that have been delayed until students are off campus. Yes, have some space and distance. Hannah's excited about more parking available on campus. I'm sure it's going to be a bit easier time getting into campus. Mary enjoys longer days with the sun out, for sure. I am looking forward to more squirrels hanging out outside because I love watching the squirrels scurry around. So they just kind of came out a couple of months ago. Nina, projects and creating programs as well as parking. Matthew is excited about having Fridays off for sure. Well, thank you for, if there are others that want to contribute, you're welcome to do that. We're going to kind of shift to some of our items. As you all are probably familiar with here at College Autism Network and Canvas, we have a listserv. There have been a ton of research studies being disseminated recently that folks are conducting. So that's been a great space for folks to enlist participants and gather feedback from others. So if you're not already on the listserv, there is a hyperlink to that in our meeting agenda. And you can send out messages yourself. We also welcome, if you are so inclined, to be a formal College Autism Network member. Mind you, still, regardless of being a CAN member or not, you still have access to Canvas meetings. There are some additional perks associated with being an official CAN member, including some discounts on the College Autism Summit and some other elements as well. We also have the College Autism Summit collections. So these are video recordings of some of the presentations from our last summit that was held virtually, where we kind of packaged them together, and it's a chance to access them again. So we encourage you to check those out too, because we have several nice themes cataloged in there. And Lee, do you have any updates related to the summit or pieces of information that you'd like to share with the greater group?
Just that the call for proposals is currently open. So we are anxious to see who among you would like to share your brilliant work. I will drop a link to the summit website right there, and if you open that, you'll scroll down and see call for proposals, and the deadline for that is June 5th. So you still have a whole month to think about it, because I know it's a busy time of year. So we hope to see those proposals come rolling in. One other thing that I just wanted to mention, if you are not on the formal College Autism Network mailing list, and the way you would know that is that at the beginning of the month, you get a newsletter that comes from us. If you don't get that newsletter and you'd like to, it's not, brilliant literary work, but it does have useful resources and announcements. If you'd like to be added to our mailing list, drop your email and institution affiliation in the chat here, and I will grab that and move you into our mailing list so you can look forward to our May newsletter. Thanks, Brett.
Great, thank you, Lee. And there you go. At this point, we want to allocate space, as we always do. If folks have any news to share, resources to pass along, research studies to alert others about in which you are seeking assistance. So you'll see that we have one in the chat, one in the agenda illustrated. I don't know, is Ava here or Elliot? I don't think they are here. But I will mention, since it is listed in the agenda, that they are developing a study related to recruiting autistic adults for an online survey examining sticky thinking, otherwise known as repetitive thinking, stemming or repetitive behaviors, and mental health. And their contact information is listed in the meeting agenda. We will put this in the meeting minutes as well. If you know folks who might be eligible and or interested in participating in that, there's also a link to the flyer, and I'll drop in, again, a link to the meeting agenda in case you want to explore that further. Do other folks here on the call today have any news, resources, research studies that they'd like to share with everybody? Because this is a great space to get a lot of perspective. I think we're all just thinking about what we're excited about with summer. I think that's definitely on our minds now, right?
Yeah, Brett, I'd like to make a short
Go for it.
A short note. My name is Ken Gobo. I'm from Landmark College, and our Institute for Research and Training is offering a 2-day summer institute, June 27th, 28th, on neurodiversity and intersectionality. And I'll put a link in the chat for anyone who wants further information on that.
Great, thank you, Ken. And I'll definitely incorporate that into the meeting minutes as well. other news or items to pass along? Well, since it is the end of the semester, it is worth posing a question to the group here. Are there any, is anybody here graduating or connected with someone who is graduating? Because I imagine there's going to be a lot of celebrations taking place over the coming weeks. I think maybe we're all just on the edge of our seat and ready for Brittany to deliver her presentation. I think that's maybe what I'm sensing here. But if there are items to pass along, feel free to use the chat toward that end, and we will be sure to disseminate that. So let me turn it over to my friend, my colleague, fellow CAN leadership team member, Dr. Brittany Jackson, very recently with that designation. And yeah, Brittany is going to go into the research on post-secondary social support programs for students with ASD as described by students, directors, and staff. As many of you probably recognize, developing a dissertation or any major research project is laden with a lot of hours of labor and love. And we know that Brittany's been in that space, and we're just excited to hear more. We encourage you to be thinking of questions to pose to Brittany. You can insert them in the chat. You can also share them verbally toward the end of our time together today. But Brittany, the virtual floor is yours.
Thanks, Brett. Let me just get my screen up here. And can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So thank you and welcome everyone. As Brett mentioned, my name is Dr. Brittany Jackson, and I am the online learning manager at Hiram College, but I also serve, as Brett mentioned, as the Director of Training and Technology for CAN. And again, as he mentioned, this is my presentation that's focused on my most recently defended dissertation, post-secondary social support programs for students with ASD as described by students, directors, and staff. So things that I'm going to cover here. So I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about the study, the literature review, the research questions that I posed, the methodology, the findings that I found from both students and staff, along with some discussion and conclusions, just like probably many of you have done for your dissertations as well. So I had a few quick definitions, and again, you guys are all probably, this group is probably very familiar with a lot of these terms, so I will touch on them just briefly here. The first one is accommodations, and so accommodations are any support or device provided to a student to assist them in accessing course material, and without changing the concept being measured or taught. Autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is the developmental disability affecting a person's social and psychological development. Neurotypical students or people are those who are not affected by a developmental disorder like ASD, ADHD, dyslexia, etc. And finally, social support programs, or SSPs as I refer to them, are programs at higher education institutions that focus on social and emotional well-being of the student with ASD, not just the academic component. These programs offer support beyond what they would receive from a disability services office typically. And more recently, the more common term, though it hadn't quite kicked off yet when I started my writing, for these are called autism support programs. So I just never went back and changed it to autism support programs within my dissertation. So what's the problem here? What was I trying to find? SSPs, are still fairly new, and there hasn't been a lot of research done on them. That's definitely picking up with all of you guys, which I'm excited to keep reading about. And there hasn't been anything where it focuses necessarily on how the students or staff describe SSPs. We know that ASD students withdraw from college at least a 40% higher rate than their neurotypical peers. And this is problematic for families who could incur large amounts of debt with no degree. And withdrawing also takes an emotional toll on the student, but it's problematic for universities on the other side because losing these students results in a loss of revenue, lower retention rates, and lower graduation rates. So the purpose of the study was to examine how staff of the SSPs describe why they think students with ASD choose their SSPs and how the students themselves describe why they chose them. I also wanted to identify what classifies as challenges or areas of improvement that SSPs run into. And finally, I wanted to also investigate how the participants, both the students and the staff alike, describe the advantages and disadvantages of these social support programs. So a quick overview of the literature that I had reviewed for this. So I focused my literature review on autism spectrum disorders in K-12 as a starting point and compared that to higher education because the supports required to be provided are different between the two, at least here in the United States. And, again, I also tried to focus in a little bit on those social support programs when I was doing my research. So in K-12, for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, or the IDEA Act, schools are charged with developing an individualized education plan that provides services enabling a student with ASD to progress through the general curriculum. However, when these students get to college, the Americans with Disabilities Act indicates that universities are really only required to provide accommodations that do not cause undue burden to the institution. So most institutions provide accommodations that are more frequently things like extended time on tests, priority registration, note takers, recording of lectures, or interpreters. However, these accommodations we know are frequently insufficient to actually meet the students' needs, and that creates another barrier for these students. And as many in this group know, SSPs are a newer trend in higher education, and they vary in the types of services they offer above traditional accommodations granted by an institution. Some offer transition services, others provide additional social interactions, daily living skills. Some offer employment transition. Peer-to-peer workshops is another option in some of them. And many times these are fee-based programs as well. So what were my three research questions in this case? So the first one was, what are the experiences of participants, directors, and staff members connected with SSPs at 2-year and 4-year post-secondary institutions? Why do these participants, directors, and staff members believe students choose their program? And then my third question is, how do participants, directors, and staff members affiliated with SSPs describe the advantages and disadvantages of student participation within their programs? So for my framework, I used a constructivist framework, which is an interpretive framework to understand the world and develop specific meanings to experiences. This framework is subjective to individual people, but it also allowed me to explore the shared values and experiences of both the students and the staff. So open-ended survey questions allowed participants to express their own experiences in their own words. While the majority of the study utilized an electronic survey, I did follow up with some folks for personal interviews of some of the staff and directors who were willing to be contacted, and those were held either by phone or email. And those interviews were mostly just to provide a little bit more clarity and material for myself. And then for bias, I do have a personal belief that all students deserve the opportunity to participate in post-secondary education, and I believe in the supports that these SSPs provide to students in higher education. So this may have contributed to some bias on my part. I acknowledge that, and I attempted to mitigate this by reflecting regularly and journaling throughout the process to re-examine the data and ensure my views were not causing any unintentional bias. And I also had another researcher review the data to see if they were finding similar themes to what I was finding, just to help make sure I was staying as close to the data as I could. So this was a qualitative study, and it used a descriptive or hermeneutical phenomenological approach. I love always saying that. And it focused on the lived experiences of the students and the staff of these SSPs, because their voices were necessary in understanding how they see these programs. It was a proposed sample, as the participants needed to have some connection to an SSP in order to complete the survey. So those in these programs were who was primarily targeted. And initially, the sample only included students enrolled in SSPs. I was really trying to get their feedback. However, there was a very low response rate of only 3 students. So I expanded it a little bit to include the SSP staff responses to similar questions. And so in total, there were 3 students and 13 staff who participated in the study. And the initial survey responses were collected using SurveyMonkey. Surveys sent to the students remained anonymous, whereas the staff of the SSPs had the option to remain anonymous, or they could provide their contact information if they chose to. And those were the folks that I could potentially follow up by phone or email. And to maintain some consistency between staff and students, I primarily only reached out to the staff if there were additional questions that I had or discrepancies in their answers that I wanted to dig in a little bit more on. I stored all the data on a personal OneDrive account that only I had access to. And once I had that data, all those responses were then transposed and coded. And to do this, I used detailed note-taking, reflection, and journaling throughout the process. I first coded that textual evidence and then examined the ad verbatim quotations. Then I re-examined the initial topics for relevancy and common themes. And once I'd done that, I asked an outside researcher to also review the data, and they came to similar conclusions and similar themes that I had found as well from the data that was collected. And then finally, I also tried to triangulate that data a little bit with responses from information found on that institution's website as well. Go to the next. Sorry, it was not. There we go. Okay, sorry. It was trying to decide what to do for me there. Okay, so some of my findings. So there were only 3 student participants, as I mentioned, and so the data here is limited. But I also thought it was very important to note the student responses. The 3 student participants, who I am calling Brett, Joe, and Michael, were asked how they learned about their SSP. And Brett noted it was a building they walked past every day. And Joe wrote that their parents told them that they should take a look. Michael stated that their teachers recommended they look at it. And then when asked why they chose that SSP, Brett explained that they went through a bout of depression their first year, realized they needed that extra help, and then learned about the program that way. Joe had found that their SSP was the best fit for them, and then Michael felt that going into college they would need additional assistance that their SSP could provide. And then all 3 students stated that the additional supports from empathetic social support staff were both the social and the emotional support they were providing was a huge advantage to the SSP. And Brett stated that they no longer felt like, quote, lone wolf, unquote, as that was what they had felt their first year when they were going through that bout of depression. In terms of disadvantages, the students included social interaction, specifically when they had to interact with their, quote, lower functioning, end quote, peers, their lower functioning peers in the program. This could be because, as Brett stated, they had a hard time, quote, opening up, unquote, to new people, even to others within their own program. 2 of the students also found time management to be a disadvantage, primarily the number of meetings they had to attend regularly through their social support program, and they had the feeling it, quote, ate into their leisure time, end quote there. And then in terms of challenges, Brett remarked on the need for students within the SSP to learn, quote, self-reflection. And through Brett's personal self-reflection, he included things like reflecting on, quote, his words, walls, tables, people's behavior, siblings, etc., end quote, which is not typically considered a form of self-reflection. And Joe indicated that they wanted the inappropriate behavior of their peers to be addressed, stating that the program should focus more on what they call appropriate social interactions. And Joe also stated that they themselves did not require additional supports for appropriate social interaction. And then because the 13 staff, we had 13 staff who participated, the staff perspectives had a little bit more depth to them. So for recruitment, they all indicated they utilized the website as their top recruiting tool, which is no different than how most institutions would market to their neurotypical students. And the staff also said they used conferences and brochures as kind of their top items to recruit students. They felt that students made their final decisions to attend their institution based on fit, location, or size, and the fact that there was an SSP, or even simply the reputation of the school. One staff member stated that, quote, "We keep our numbers small so that we can provide quality services to the students we can and do serve," end quote. The SSP itself was also considered an attractor with its comprehensive support services and the autism-friendly atmosphere it creates on campus, as well as some of the institution's strong diversity and inclusion atmosphere that it provides. One staff member, who I call Harriet, wrote, supports are in the areas of self-advocacy, social independence, executive functioning, and employment career development, all of which are student-driven, and students tend to appreciate the autonomy that they provide. Staff believe their advantages and strengths included the types of comprehensive supports that they provided to students, as well as the ability to streamline access to other campus resources. They also felt that the social engagement and networking aspect of their programs created friendships and community, along with the personalized staff interactions that students encountered in their programs. Another strength that they noted was also that student choice and autonomy. For disadvantages, staff cited possibly the stigma of being outed with a disability, with one participant specifically calling higher education ableist. Some felt that the time commitment was both an advantage and a disadvantage, citing that they felt that the programming they offered really helped their students. But also the staff also recognized that the amount of programming could take away some of the autonomy that the students, some of the autonomy of the students and how they spend their time. Another disadvantage several staff cited was program cost. Some of these programs can range in cost from $1,000 per semester to just over $10,000 a semester. So that can be another barrier. Staff cited for challenges in two key areas, students and programs. So under students, they cited things like career transition support services or internship placement, and they indicated the need for additional staff, most specifically counselors. They also identified a need for campus-wide awareness, acceptance, and understanding. And then under the program area, they specified funding and resources, staffing, trying to grow a program in COVID-19, because this was happening during that time, lack of physical space, lack of acceptance and inclusion of neurodivergence. Funding, resources, staffing, and space all came down to the same issue, the need for additional funding for them. I think, again, the COVID-19 is likely an anomaly, as hopefully this will not continue to be the new norm, as we are so often stating. And the lack of acceptance and inclusion of neurodivergence mentioned here, I interpreted to mean that as a program, they're struggling to raise acceptance and inclusion on their campuses. Outside of these same areas, the staff also noted that the increased employment opportunities post-graduation was an area of improvement that could be made. So when I'm examining the information more closely, we find under recruitment websites and brochures, as well as students looking for the right fit or size. Those are the same areas that both neurotypical and neurodivergent students are looking for. So the SSP staff must understand that their students with ASD, they need to understand their students with ASD's needs and attempt to meet them. Advantages and strengths that the staff focused on was connecting services to students, while the students focused a little bit more on the SSP staff being the most valuable piece. These can both go hand in hand. The students can feel that the SSP staff are the most valuable because of the services that the SSP staff connect them to and help them succeed. And these programs also create a safe space or a safety net for those with ASD, providing them a sense of community that they may otherwise struggle with. So, as I mentioned before, the staff focused on stigma and peer or faculty perceptions as the key disadvantages of their SSPs, while the students were focused more on time management and social interaction with their peers. This difference could be due to SSP staff who may have encountered challenges to creating an understanding and acceptance around neurodiversity on their campus, while the students may have been focusing specifically on what was annoying them about the SSP at that time when they filled out the survey. Both students and staff focused on the sense of community, which was considered to be both positive and negative. Staff seemed to interpret the sense of community the SSP created more positively, while the students focused on it a little bit more negatively, with Michael specifically noting that the interactions he had with his peers in the SSP were difficult because they were, quote, lower functioning than him. This discrepancy could be as simple as the staff believing that the program they're creating is beneficial, while students, as all students tend to do, view it as a waste of their time that could be better utilized pursuing their own personal endeavors. When specifically discussing the challenges, many staff focused on career and internship placement as well as the need for funding, whereas students focused more on time management that interfered with their leisure time. And students also thought more appropriate social interactions for their peers was challenging. This dichotomy can likely be espoused to students not seeing behind the curtain, as it were. What they see are the supports that the SSP is providing them, not what goes into making those things happen. And the self-reflection aspect from Brett, again, is interesting in that they focus on their peers needing to learn critical thinking and self-reflection skills. But Brett's own examples of self-reflection focus more on inanimate objects and not so much looking into themselves and their own experiences more closely. Areas of improvement, again, for staff primarily focused on funding and additional staffing, as many institutions, regardless of discipline or department, are struggling financially and attempting to make do with less resources than is ideal. Students focused, again, on communication, physical space, and active listening, which, again, are the things that they experience every day. So compared to what, the possibilities might be if there was more funding and staff support. So implications for this study can be focused specifically towards university administrations who may consider creating an SSP at their institution. If they want to create an SSP, they should ensure that they hire compassionate and empathetic staff who in turn ensure frequent, clear, and concise communication to their students. Within the program, they should work towards probably promoting self-reflection, teaching students those critical thinking skills that they'll need in the world. And the other area that they should consider is financial and human capital concerns that surround SSPs. Administrations have to be willing to put forth funding to keep the cost low for the students, but also high enough to hire enough SSP and counseling staff to work with these students. There were limitations to this study, which included a very low student response rate, as I mentioned. Again, only 3 students responded. But I did learn through the process that other institutions do require studies to go through their IRB process before it was allowed to be shared with students, regardless if it had IRB approval from another institution, which makes sense, but I didn't take that into consideration originally when I was preparing this. The study was also self-selected. I narrowed that pool originally by targeting schools with SSPs based on the list from the College Autism Network that Brett and others have wonderfully put together. And then the staff of these SSPs could decide whether to share it with their students or to complete it themselves. The study focused on only 2-year and 4-year post-secondary institutions, but there are also a lot of certificate programs available as well that might be useful in examining. And one possible limitation was having institutions from a limited geographic area. However, in this study, that was not the case. The study had a good mix of institutions from around the country. An international approach might be interesting to explore as well. So, coming back to those questions, to answer the first question, what are the experiences of participants, directors, and staff members connected with SSPs at 2-year and 4-year post-secondary institutions? So staff and students believe there is room for growth and improvement in the SSPs. Social support programs want to strive for better internship and career placement opportunities now that their students in these programs are hitting points where they're graduating from college and reaching that next hurdle, which is, of course, getting the job. Clear communication and teaching, more critical thinking and self-reflection skills are necessary. And of course, funding, space, and human capital are always a concern, as they are at almost every higher education institution in the US. The second question asked, why do these participants, directors, and staff members believe students choose their program? Well, students with ASD are no different than neurotypical students who want to find the right fit, the right size, the right location, and that SSP should continue to employ the same recruitment strategies as they do with neurotypical students. And then the final question, how do participants, directors, and staff members affiliated with SSPs describe the advantages and disadvantages of student participation within their program? The advantages included a sense of belonging and community, along with an empathetic staff. Disadvantages included some stigmatization that may occur for students with SSPs among not just their neurotypical peers, but also among the faculty and staff of the institution. Finding a balance on SSP peer social interactions and how they are structured is necessary to ensure that the students within these programs are being challenged and stimulated both with their neurotypical peers, but also with each other. And as always, the suggestions for future research, there were several areas of improvement for this study. First, I might have asked some more detailed questions on the survey. I was asking questions that were maybe a little too broad in some instances, and I would probably design it so that the researcher could follow up with the student participants if at all possible. While that would take away the the anonymous nature of it, I can't say the other version of anonymous, it would allow the researcher, it would have allowed me to dig in and really hear more from them. I would also, of course, really push to get more student views. The responses I got from them were great, and I think I would have loved to have seen even more opportunities there. And again, I'd reach out more to those who are part of the College Autism Network. We were just, as I started this process, we were just really kind of getting the programming up on our website. So we were working through that process, or the program list up on our website. And, we're constantly growing as an organization here with the College Autism Network, which is amazing. And with the SSPs, more and more institutions are offering them, and it's constantly expanding. So it'd be great to continue to investigate this as we move forward. And I would suggest using a similar model to what was used with the staff participants, again, allowing them to remain anonymous or to opt in to be contacted for follow-up for the students. That would give the students that autonomy and choice, and give the researcher, again, that option to go back and talk with them. And I might also suggest reaching out to the targeted institutions to determine their IRB protocols before reaching out with the surveys, and if time allowed me, to see if it was possible to complete their institution's IRB requirements so I could go and ask those students and get their feedback so that the survey could be shared with them. I'd also expand this study to all post-secondary institutions in the US, as again, there may be newer programs that have not yet been identified by the College Autism Network and others. And I would also suggest reaching out internationally as well, because I know social support programs are popping up in Ireland, Australia, France, and other countries. And I might also suggest limiting the pool to just undergraduate students or staff of SSPs that serve undergraduate students, because older students may need less supports than those just beginning college or just beginning their college career. So it'd be good to kind of just narrow that in a little bit more, I think. And then suggestions for additional studies, I would include examining how specific services students receive in an SSP vary from traditional accommodations and what impact that's had on the students. Another would be to develop or identify metrics for measuring social growth of students participating in an SSP to determine the impact that the SSP might have in that area. And then finally, I would suggest evaluating students with ASD and SSPs and then measuring their success after college. Is this SSP model working to help them get the social skills that they need to be successful in their career after college? So that wraps up my presentation. I do want to thank you all for attending, and I am looking forward to questions. I do want to take a quick moment while they're not here to thank and acknowledge my dissertation committee, Dr. Alston, Dr. Kazarian, and Dr. Chappelle, who were all very instrumental in providing me amazing feedback to make it through this process. So I'm going to open it up here to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so I can see you guys a little bit easier here. I do see that there is something in the chat. Let's see. Oh, I was just Brett saying, feel free to insert your questions. Never mind.
Yes, thank you so much, Brittany. Yeah, folks, we have about 15 minutes for Q&A, so this would be a great time to share what you're thinking about. And Lee is going to start us off. What role should autism program staff play, if any, in educating the rest of campus about autism?
That's a good question. I think my thought is they are the key people, some of the most knowledgeable people on that campus, other than, of course, the students themselves. So I think that, them teaching their faculty and staff, as well as their students about neurodiversity, autism, I think they have to play a role in educating the campus about autism. I'm hoping here, actually at Hiram, next year to start what's probably going to be about a 3-year project called the Power of Neurodiversity Project, and where we're going to have meetings with students who are neurodivergent, for those who are interested, to talk about things that could be improved on campus, but also raising awareness and understanding for those who, the faculty and staff on our campus provide professional development to them, as well as some programming for students across the board. We don't have an SSP here at Hiram. I've been trying to get one, and I'm hoping that at some point soon I can convince our administration to move that way. But I think that they do have a role because, again, they're some of the more knowledgeable people other than, again, the students themselves. So I think them educating others would be great.
Thanks, Brittany. As we await potentially some additional questions, I'll say, one, it's just been great to see you, crystallize this project into something very meaningful. And I was doing a lot of self-reflection as I was listening to your work and seeing parallels with what I uncovered in my own research, particularly around the point of students in these spaces often feeling at times disconnect with their peers because of the salience of characteristics related to autism and how they perceive that, and a lot of that connected to how and when folks obtain diagnoses themselves. And I'm wondering how you processed that feedback in terms of programmatic opportunities to, I guess, bridge gaps in where there might be these areas of disconnect.
Yeah, I was, I've thought about it. Again, I think every campus is so different, in terms of the way that we interact with each other, the way that, we are structured in a sense, that I think creating that sense of community is incredibly important. I think finding others, we are all people who I think are always trying to find others like us, similar interests, similar experiences, And I think that we, from a higher education standpoint, could work better. And this can go across the board, not just so much neurodiversity, but in so many other ways. We can do a better job of helping students find their niche, find their group, find their community. We can do more programming to promote that. One of the comments from one of the staff was, higher education is very ableist. There's a lot of ableism in higher education, and there is. So from that standpoint, hold on one second. Let me just hit that button there. So I think, I struggled. Again, I was someone who was diagnosed late in life with ADHD just recently thankfully through the dissertation process. That's one of the things I learned about myself. And, knowing that now and reflecting back makes a lot of sense. So those students who, or those folks who are finding out later in life, I feel like that maybe starts to give them a sense of maybe why they struggled in some situations or struggled with certain scenarios. And if they had had a community or had that knowledge, it could have been a different ballgame, right? They could have found that group together, that they really felt bonded. Sorry, that ended weird. Let's see. I see Lee's question about, does your research tell us anything that programs need to change more immediately to better serve students? In terms of the biggest thing that, again, the students commented on was that communication piece. They seemed to feel that their SSPs didn't communicate with them enough, or about the right things, I think was sort of how they were describing it. And so, I think just like with any group or organization, you have to make sure that you've got clear, transparent communication. And because sometimes, if you're sending out emails, those can be easily misinterpreted by everybody, that, maybe finding alternative means of communicating beyond just, sending emails to them or flyers to them or things like that. When you're having programming meetings, can you, have those conversations and reiterate it at each of those? Different things like that could potentially be helpful. Let's see, Jill, what do you think about how level of supports offered and costs associated with the program factors into perceptions of both students and staff about these programs? I find at our university a lot of perceptions about our SSP is related to the cost and selectivity of the program. One of the first things when I was first thinking about this project was, examining the cost and what types of supports. Originally, I was only going to focus on like the types of supports that these programs offered, but I kind of started to deviate from that. And the fact that there's at least one program, and while it is an amazing program, and please know I'm never knocking any program, the fact that there's a program that costs $10,000 a semester is insane to me. That's like, you can't, like, families are going to struggle immensely to try and pay for that, plus the cost of college, right? So it's not just, oh, here's an extra $100 each semester. Here's, you've got to come up with another 10 grand. And each state is different in terms of what, how funds can be used that they receive, maybe through their departments of disabilities in the states. I know some, like Pennsylvania, I believe, will allow students to use money like that and to put towards education, because it's sort of like that continuing training. I don't think Ohio allows that, if I'm remembering correctly. And so that varies from state to state. So how is a student, even if they wanted to go, if the family really, it's a great fit, it's the perfect place, it's a great program, that's a high price to pay for 4 years. If you're doing that all 4 years, that's insane. That takes them into that much further debt. And if it doesn't work out right at that institution, now you've at least potentially got $10,000 to $20,000 of debt, depending on whether you attended a semester or a year before making that decision. So I think, finding ways to mitigate those costs from a university standpoint, I think has to be key. I know it costs money to make sure that it's, run appropriately and get the best programming. And we definitely, highlighted that we always need more funding. But I think there's got to be better ways to not put that burden on the students and families? Can we figure out, granting agencies or other places that could really help us through create these programs? Let's see here, Gary, you suggested further study is necessary in terms of developing metrics for measuring social growth. Based on your work and experience so far, how would you start? Oh, that's a good question. I honestly haven't thought about how I would start that. I'd probably actually come to this group and start talking with folks and coordinate, figuring out, who's maybe on a path towards this that we could, collaborate, or who else might be interested, so that there could be a bigger collaboration, sort of like I know how Brett and Kirsten did with the program, looking at all the programs in the country. Something like that could be really beneficial, because again, you'd have a wide variety of people from around the country or around the world potentially who could bring different perspectives. I would also include those program staff of those SSPs. I think that they're important to be involved if we're going to, think about measuring social growth. And I also think it's incredibly important to include those with ASD, or if we're just talking social growth across the board, having those voices there to help inform what we might be wanting to help look for, and determine what social growth really means. I think, again, having those three groups together would be really beneficial in providing additional information. Oh, it was Katie. That's right. Sorry. I began with a K, my brain. Katie McDermott was the other one with Brett who created that wonderful program database. Let's see. I saw Denise. Thank you for your presentation. Now that you've completed the project, what would you do differently to promote student recruitment and involvement in your project if you had to do it again? Any ideas? I definitely struggled on that front. Well, there's a few different things I would do. Number one, part of the issue was, again, that in order to even send the survey to students at some institutions, it had to go through their IRB process. Otherwise, they could not share them with them, which, I totally understand. And so one of the things I would probably do is, if I'm going to be targeting these specific schools again, I'd probably reach out well in advance and find out what things do they require if we wanted to do something like this, to at least give more possibility to be sharing it out. And then in terms of actually getting, student feedback, once we were able to do all of that, students, if it was on my campus, it would be, I'm going to invite them and have food. But, when it's not in person, it's a lot harder. Compensation goes a long way, and so I probably would try to figure out some way to compensate them for their time. What that looks like, I don't know. It could be gift cards, could be whatever. I know, plenty of things out there have tried different mechanisms to make that happen. And so I just didn't at the time have the funding when I was doing my project. It just didn't have that funding. So, yes, absolutely, autistic voices should be involved in any program development, which is amazing. So yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah, these are all great questions, everybody. We do have time for one more if anybody has a burning question on their minds.
Oh, thank you, Denise. I appreciate that. On our IRB, we have a collaborative agreement protocol that can sometimes be used when working with others. That's really good to know. That's not something I knew existed in none of my, I don't think my chair ever mentioned anything like that, or any of my committee members, because I did reach out to a few different people trying to find something to try to get those student voices, but that's great. Good to know. I will definitely keep that in mind for future.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, but I'm going to end with the final question, Brittany, and this is in the spirit of one of my dissertation committee members. What did you most learn about yourself through this process as a scholar and as someone who's really invested in, in these programs and the work that they accomplish?
Um, well, I think I mentioned I was diagnosed with ADHD through this process, and that learning that about myself has been huge. It has answered a lot of questions. It has made me understand myself that much more. And so while the process of doing a dissertation is, quite grueling and never, I don't think anybody truly like absolutely loves going through that whole process, every second of it, learning that has been worth it. It's given me ways to approach things differently now that I have that diagnosis. And again, I think this work continued to show me that these programs are worth every cent that we can put into them. I think that these programs. I wish I keep hoping that I can get one started here at Hiram, because we're a nice small campus, and I just think it's a really great little place. And I'm hoping now I can push, now that I've got a little bit more fodder here, that I can push on that with this. But it did kind of solidify that I really want to try and get something like that happening here. And that's kind of where I want to head next, I think. So.
Great. Well, let's send our virtual applause and thank you to you,
You're welcome.
Dr. Brittany Jackson, for presenting here today. Yeah, we're very, very excited for you. And I also want everybody here to know that the database that many of you are familiar with on the College Autism Network website that features this list of programs stemmed from a working group that we at CAN started developing several years ago, and Brittany was part of the infrastructure there. Yeah, we're all very proud of you and excited for you as you enter this next chapter. So everyone, our next Canvas meeting is Friday, May 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So slightly earlier than today, but nonetheless, we will have Caden Stockwell, who's a doctoral student at the University of Virginia. And Caden will be talking about a mixed methods project related to understanding the process of being an autistic undergraduate at UVA. And so it's the work's more in development, and Caden's a great scholar, also a self-advocate, and I imagine we'll have a fruitful conversation with them then. And we look forward to seeing you on May 20th, hopefully. If not, be rest assured that we do have these recorded. And I also want to mention to folks, we are starting to assemble our slate of Canvas presentations for July and beyond. So if you have, if one of you may be interested in presenting about research that you're engaging in, please reach out to me. My email address is in the chat right now, bnacma@ncsu.edu. We also encourage, if there are students in your networks who are self-advocates, folks who are graduating, have research and development, we would welcome their contributions. Mind you, we only have a certain number of slots for Canvas presentations each year, but we would certainly encourage you to let us know, and we can add that to our list and try to find a space for you to engage with others. If not through Canvas, then certainly maybe via the summit or another outlet. Glad to have you all here today. We wish you a good weekend ahead, and feel free to stay connected with us. We'll see you in May.
Bye, guys. Thank you, everyone.